Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. I would like to start this by saying my family is crazy. Um, I realize a lot of people say that, um, but they're usually talking about things like my family is loud, eccentric, weird. You have that one uncle you cannot supposed to leave the little kids with, that type of thing. Um, and my family has all that too, including the uncle you're not supposed to leave the kids with. But um, but um, my family has multiple cases of bipolar disorder, anxiety, depression, ADHD, suicide, alcohol and drug addiction. When I say my family's crazy, they're crazy. They're actually medically diagnosed crazy. We have therapists and medication and everything. I'd also like to to point out that I'm mostly speaking about my mother's side of the family. My father's side of the family is more loud and obnoxious type of crazy. They're from Jersey. They're loud and obnoxious. Love them dearly. But they fit in that category. I'm talking about my mother's side of the family, who was also from Jersey. But in addition to being loud and obnoxious and don't leave anybody with the uncle kind of thing, um, they're all kind of nuts. I'm not going to name names and point fingers and say who has what and why. But we're all a little crazy. Every last one of us. No one has escaped unscathed. Uh, I used to say, um, mostly after my mother had died, that I was the sanest one in the family that I knew of. While at the same time realizing that's a very, very low bar to set. um, I would pass that torch to the younger generation, or some people in the younger generation right now. Um, I've always known a little something going on up here that isn't quite right. I never really try to put a label on it. I don't seek therapy or medication or anything like that. I'm functional. I know something's not right up here, but I never felt the need really to do anything about it because I get up, I go to work, I have a job, I have a wife and children. Um, I'm mainly, I'm antisocial. I'm an introvert, and I thought that maybe some of those were tied into this, but I wasn't sure at what level. And I never, like I said, I never really did any real examination of it. My kids have tried to suggest some things, and I've kind of said, "Don't quit your day jobs, kids. You're not therapists. You don't know me as well as you think you do. Don't try and diagnose daddy." um, but I was on the internet, as one does, and I happened to see a YouTube video titled with the title of something that I was unfamiliar with. And I was like, what the hell? What the hell are they talking about? And so I kind of typed it in the search, and it popped up, and I started reading the what do you call it? The symptoms that categorize this thing, and I was like, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh my. And it's like I matched to I you know I'd looked at other things. I'd looked at the more common. I looked at bipolar, I looked at ADHD and that kind of stuff, and I these things do kind of cross pollinate a little bit. There's some things that anxiety, depression, ADHD, and all the different disorders kind of match to. And yeah, I could point out one or two things in each one. It's okay, yeah, I do that, yeah, I do that, and yeah, I do that, but nothing to really that would say, oh, I am this or I am this. But I was looking at this one, and I'm not going to say what it is. Um, but I was looking at this particular diagnosis, and I matched it like 95%. and I'm looking at it going, so I guess that's what's wrong with me. um, because it explains so much of my behavior. Because, like, there are times when, you know, people have said to me, hey, do this thing. And I'm like, you have no idea how much I cannot do that thing. um, and I never really, like I said, never examined it. I never really tried to nail it down. So I kind of came across this diagnosis by accident, just random internet hopping and happening to see that, oh, random curiosity, looking at things, not wanting, trying to figure out what's going on, and not really trying to self-diagnose, just hitting a diagnosis that really, really seems to be what's going on in my head. And I don't know if it helps to know what's wrong with you. It explains it. It explains a lot. It's like, okay, I can understand. It helps me understand why I make the choices that I make, why I do the things that I do. So on the one hand, having that knowledge, I guess, might help. I don't know. Um, I don't know if it helps. On the one hand, I'm kind of glad that I know. It's nice to have an explanation for things. I'm not going to seek out therapy or counseling or medication for it. Like I said, I function. There are times when, yes, there are things I cannot do, but it's not like going to stop me from paying my bills or loving my children or my wife or my family. It does tie into my behavior a bit. It does explain a bit of my introversion and my tendency to isolate myself. But beyond that, I do get out and do things. I do interact with people, albeit not as often as I should, not as often as would be good for my mental health. And it's also one of those things that, it's not so severe that I think I need therapy or medication. Um, whatever my diagnosis might be, I am pretty low on the scale because I can get out, function, socialize, do my things. I do the things. you know, whatever is wrong with my head, it doesn't stop me from doing everything. It just kind of pushes me in a direction. Most of the time, it pushes, and occasionally, and as I've mentioned before previously when talking about being an introvert, how much I do these things that I have a problem with depends on my level of mental health. My mental health for the last little while hasn't been good. It fluctuates. Been a lot of stress in my life for the last month or so, some of which you know about because I've talked about it here. Some of it I haven't talked about because it was work related and didn't matter. But yeah, I have a diagnosis now. Good hunting.